Before we move on to calculating variance and standard deviation, we should know a little bit about populations and samples and the difference between variance and standard deviation. First of all, we talked about in lesson 1 that populations are large and samples are small. Samples are taken from populations. That's because it's impossible to get the data from populations often. So if we run a good study and we take a representative sample, the results we find from the sample can be inferred to the population. So we're always calculating sample data. We're rarely calculating population data. That said, there are still formulas for population variables. Here's the population variance, where we have sigma squared as variance. We have mu as the mean of the population, and we have big N as the overall size of the population. Here's the standard deviation. Now here's the first thing I want to point out is, notice the only difference between these two graphs is this one has a square root over it. And that's the only difference between standard deviation and variance. The rest of these formulas we'll be using for our homework and our exams. These are two different versions of sample variance and standard deviations. It turns out you can use either one and they'll get you the same answer. Remember, this is s squared, which is variance, and s is standard deviation. So the only difference between these two is the square root. The only difference is the square root. These two are for raw data, and these two right here are for group frequency data.